Imagine being surrounded by enemy forces, with no clear escape route and dwindling supplies. This was the desperate situation facing the Sixth Army, led by General Friedrich Paulus, as they reached the banks of the Volga River in August 1942. The German army had been pushing deep into Soviet territory, driven by Hitler's orders to capture the city of Stalingrad, a strategic industrial hub that would give the Nazis control over the region's oil fields and access to the Caspian Sea. For the Soviet soldiers trapped inside Stalingrad, the situation was equally dire. Over 300,000 Red Army troops were pinned down, with no way to retreat or receive reinforcements. The city was a maze of rubble and devastation, with buildings reduced to smoldering ruins and streets littered with the bodies of the dead. As the German army closed in, the Soviet forces fought on, but it was clear that their situation was hopeless. The German army, however, was unaware of the impending doom. They had been told that the Soviet forces were weak and disorganized, and that a decisive victory was within their grasp. Hitler himself had ordered General Paulus to take the city at all costs, and the German commander had no intention of disobeying those orders. As the siege of Stalingrad entered its final stages, the German army pressed forward, convinced that they would soon emerge victorious. But the Soviet forces had one final trick up their sleeve. In a bold move, they launched a massive counterattack on November 19, 1942, known as Operation Uranus. The Soviet army had been secretly building up forces in the south, and they now launched a coordinated assault on the German flanks, cutting off the Sixth Army's supply lines and trapping them inside the city. The German army was caught off guard, and they were quickly overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the Soviet counterattack. As the days passed, the situation grew more desperate, with German soldiers begging for air support and pleading for reinforcements that never came. The Soviet army, meanwhile, continued to close in, their troops pouring into the city like a tidal wave. As the siege of Stalingrad entered its final stages, the German army was on the brink of collapse. Morale was low, supplies were running out, and the Soviet forces were closing in on all sides. It was clear that the outcome of the battle was all but certain, and that the Sixth Army would soon be forced to surrender. But even as the German army teetered on the edge of disaster, there was still a glimmer of hope. General Paulus, the commander of the Sixth Army, had been instructed by Hitler to fight on, even in the face of overwhelming odds. But as the situation grew more desperate, Paulus began to question his orders, wondering if it was worth sacrificing his men in a lost cause. As the clock ticked down, the German army was faced with an impossible choice. Would they continue to fight, even in the face of certain defeat, or would they surrender and risk being taken prisoner by the Soviet forces? The fate of the Sixth Army, and the outcome of the Battle of Stalingrad, hung precariously in the balance. The city of Stalingrad would become synonymous with sacrifice and defeat, where over 90,000 German soldiers would eventually meet their fate. But as the siege of Stalingrad entered its final stages, the German army was unaware of the disaster that lay ahead. They were about to face one of the most crushing defeats in military history, a defeat that would shake the very foundations of the Nazi war machine. As we explore the story of the Sixth Army's doomed campaign in Stalingrad, we will uncover the shocking truth behind one of the most pivotal battles of World War II. We will talk to historians, veterans, and experts who will reveal the details of the battle and the sacrifices made by the soldiers on both sides. We will also examine the strategic decisions that led to the disaster and the human cost of the conflict. But for now, let's take a closer look at the situation on the ground, as the German army teeters on the brink of collapse. What was it like to be a German soldier trapped in Stalingrad, with no clear escape route and dwindling supplies? And what were the chances of success for the Soviet forces, who were determined to break the German army's grip on the city? To answer these questions, we'll be speaking with Dr. Name, a leading historian of World War II. Dr. Name has spent years researching the Battle of Stalingrad and has uncovered some fascinating insights into the minds of the soldiers who fought on both sides. Dr. Name, can you tell us what it was like to be a German soldier trapped in Stalingrad, with no clear escape route and dwindling supplies? Imagine being surrounded by enemy forces with no clear escape route and dwindling supplies. This was the desperate situation facing the Sixth Army, led by General Friedrich Paulus, as they reached the banks of the Volga River in August 1942. But as the situation grew more dire, a different kind of war was unfolding on the Soviet side. In a secret underground bunker, deep beneath the streets of Moscow, General Georgy Zhukov was devising a plan to encircle and destroy the German army. Zhukov, a seasoned and cunning commander, had a reputation for outmaneuvering his opponents. He knew that the key to success lay in exploiting the weak points in the German defenses. According to eyewitness accounts, Zhukov spent hours poring over maps and intelligence reports, searching for any hint of a vulnerability. And then it hit him, a narrow corridor, barely 20 kilometers wide, where the German army was most exposed. Zhukov knew this was the perfect opportunity to strike. But how did the Soviets manage to gather this crucial intelligence? The answer lies in their extensive network of spies and informants who had infiltrated the German army. These agents, codenamed Rote Kapos, had been gathering vital information on German troop movements and plans for months. One such agent, a German officer named Major Erich Dethlefsen, had made his way deep into the heart of the Sixth Army. From his position as a staff officer, Dethlefsen had access to top-secret documents and was able to feed crucial information back to the Soviets. Meanwhile, on the Soviet side, Zhukov was busy mobilizing his forces. He had at his disposal a vast army of fresh troops and supplies, which he was using to close in on the German forces from all sides. The Soviet artillery was also being redeployed to target the German army's weak points, creating a devastating barrage that would soon leave the Germans reeling. As the Soviet forces closed in, the German army remained oblivious to the impending doom. But what exactly was the plan, and how did the Soviets manage to outmaneuver their enemy? The answer lies in the clever use of deception and misdirection. The Soviets had created a series of decoy units, which they used to distract the German army and draw their attention away from the real Soviet forces. These decoys were made up of Soviet soldiers dressed in German uniforms and equipped with fake equipment. They would advance toward the German lines, only to retreat and regroup, creating a false sense of security among the German troops. The Germans, convinced that the Soviets were weak and disorganized, continued to push forward, unaware of the trap that was being laid out for them. It was a tactic that would prove devastatingly effective, as the Soviet forces closed in from all sides and the German army found itself surrounded. But the question remains, how did the Germans manage to hold out for so long? The answer lies in the bravery and determination of the soldiers themselves. Despite being vastly outnumbered and outgunned, the German troops fought on, using every trick in the book to try and break through the Soviet lines. As the battle raged on, the German army's situation grew more and more desperate. With supplies running low and their forces dwindling, it seemed as though all was lost. And yet, even in the darkest of moments, there were glimmers of hope. One such glimmer came in the form of a young German officer named Lieutenant Werner Priebs. Priebs, a brilliant strategist and tactician, had been tasked with leading a small group of soldiers on a daring raid behind Soviet lines. Their mission was to gather intelligence and disrupt the Soviet supply lines, but as they pushed deeper into enemy territory, they found themselves surrounded by Soviet troops. Despite being vastly outnumbered, Priebs and his men fought bravely, using every trick in the book to try and escape. But as the Soviet forces closed in, it seemed as though all was lost. And yet, in a stunning display of bravery and cunning, Priebs and his men managed to break through the Soviet lines and make their way back to German territory. Their daring raid had given the German army a much-needed boost of morale, but it was a short-lived victory. The Soviet forces were closing in, and the German army was running out of time. The question now was, could the German army hold out long enough to be rescued, or would they be destroyed in the coming days? The fate of the Sixth Army and the course of the war hung in the balance. As the battle for Stalingrad raged on, the German army's resilience in the face of overwhelming odds would become a defining characteristic of the war. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, the Sixth Army, led by General Friedrich Paulus, continued to fight valiantly, with some units even managing to break through the Soviet lines. The city of Stalingrad was a labyrinth of rubble and debris, with buildings reduced to mere skeletons and streets littered with the bodies of the fallen. Yet the German soldiers persevered, fueled by a mix of patriotism, duty, and sheer determination. They had been tasked with capturing the city, but as the days turned into weeks, it became increasingly clear that their mission was all but impossible. The Soviet forces, however, were relentless in their pursuit of the German army. They maintained a tight grip on the city, with constant artillery bombardments and air support that seemed to pound the German positions day and night. The Soviet troops were a formidable force, driven by a desire for revenge against the invaders who had ravaged their homeland. As the battle raged on, the German army's leadership began to question the wisdom of Hitler's orders. They knew that the situation was dire, and that their chances of escape were rapidly dwindling. But they were bound by duty and loyalty to the Führer, who had entrusted them with the mission to capture Stalingrad. One of the most infamous episodes of the battle was the attempted breakout by the German Army's 11th Corps, led by General Walther von Seydlitz-Gersbach. In a daring bid to escape the Soviet trap, the Corps launched a series of attacks against the Soviet lines, but were ultimately repelled with heavy losses. The failure of the breakout attempt marked a turning point in the battle, as the German army's leadership realized that their situation was all but hopeless. Despite this, they continued to fight, driven by a sense of honor and duty that would ultimately prove to be their undoing. As the days turned into weeks, the German army's situation grew increasingly desperate. Their supplies were dwindling, their ammunition was running low, and their troops were exhausted from the constant fighting. It was clear that the battle for Stalingrad was far from over, but the outcome was all but certain. In the midst of this chaos, a peculiar phenomenon emerged, a sense of camaraderie among the German soldiers. Despite their differences and their various backgrounds, they had formed a bond that transcended the horrors of war. They had become a family, united in their struggle against the Soviet enemy. This sense of camaraderie was exemplified by the story of a German soldier named Kurt Meyer, who would later become a renowned war hero. Meyer, a young lieutenant, had been part of the 7th Panzer Division, which had been tasked with capturing the city. Despite being wounded in action, he continued to fight, leading his men with bravery and distinction. Meyer's story is a testament to the human spirit, which refuses to be broken even in the face of overwhelming adversity. His bravery and leadership inspired his men to fight on, even when all seemed lost. But as the battle raged on, it became clear that the German army's fate was all but sealed. The Soviet forces had them surrounded, and their supplies were running low. It was only a matter of time before the German army was forced to surrender. The question on everyone's mind was, what exactly led to their downfall, and what were the consequences of Hitler's decisions? Was it simply a matter of bad luck, or was there something more sinister at play? These questions would haunt the German people for generations to come, as they struggled to come to terms with the devastating consequences of the war. As the battle for Stalingrad reached its climax, the German army's leadership was faced with an impossible choice: surrender or die. The outcome of the battle would have far-reaching consequences, not just for the German army, but for the entire world. As the Soviet forces closed in on the German lines, a sense of desperation began to grip the Sixth Army. The battle for Stalingrad had been raging on for months, with both sides suffering heavy losses. But as the Soviet army's momentum grew, the German defenses began to crumble. Deep within the Soviet ranks, a new strategy was taking shape. General Georgy Zhukov, the mastermind behind the Soviet counterattack, had identified a crucial weakness in the German lines. The Germans had stretched their defenses too thin, with units scattered across the city in a desperate bid to hold off the Soviet advance. This was a golden opportunity for us to strike, General Zhukov would later recall. We focused our efforts on the most vulnerable points in the German lines, and slowly but surely, we began to push our way through. The Soviet counterattack was a series of fierce and relentless pushes, each one designed to wear down the German defenses. The Soviet forces, bolstered by fresh troops and superior numbers, began to gain the upper hand. German units, once so confident in their ability to hold off the Soviet advance, now found themselves fighting for survival. As the Soviet forces broke through the German lines, the situation became increasingly desperate for the German army. But what exactly happened to the German soldiers who managed to escape? Some, like General Friedrich Paulus's loyal adjutant, Major Hans Meyer-Welker, managed to make their way back to German lines, bearing news of the catastrophic situation facing the Sixth Army. Others, like the soldiers of the 94th Infantry Division, found themselves stranded and isolated, forced to fend for themselves in a city that was rapidly becoming a killing zone. Meanwhile, back in Berlin, the German High Command was struggling to come to terms with the gravity of the situation. The Führer, Adolf Hitler, remained resolute in his refusal to accept defeat, even as the news from Stalingrad grew increasingly dire. But as the Soviet army's momentum continued to build, it became clear that the situation was far from salvageable. The German army's supply lines had been severed, leaving them without food, water, or medicine. The once proud Sixth Army was now on the brink of collapse. And yet, even as the Soviet forces pressed on, there were still those who dared to dream of escape. A small group of German soldiers, led by a young officer named Helmut von Maltitz, managed to evade capture and make their way back to German lines. Their story, one of desperation and cunning, would become a testament to the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. As we delve deeper into the story of Stalingrad, we begin to see the faces behind the statistics, the individuals who were caught up in the maelstrom of war. But for now, let's focus on the Soviet push and the devastating consequences that unfolded as the German lines began to break. The German army was reeling, its defenses breached, its supply lines severed. As the Soviet forces pushed deeper into the city, the situation became increasingly desperate. What exactly happened to the German soldiers who managed to escape? And what did they see during those harrowing days and nights as the Soviet army closed in? We'll explore these questions in more detail, but for now, let's continue the story of Stalingrad and the catastrophic events that unfolded in the winter of 1942. As the Soviet army's momentum continued to build, the German army's situation grew more and more desperate. Their supply lines were severed, their defenses breached, and their soldiers were beginning to fall. The once proud Sixth Army was now on the brink of collapse, and the Soviet forces were poised to deliver the final blow. But even as the outcome seemed all but certain, there were still those who dared to dream of escape. A small group of German soldiers, led by a young officer named Helmut von Maltitz, managed to evade capture and make their way back to German lines. Their story, one of desperation and cunning, would become a testament to the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. As we delve deeper into the story of Stalingrad, we begin to see the faces behind the statistics, the individuals who were caught up in the maelstrom of war. But for now, let's continue the story of the Soviet push and the devastating consequences that unfolded as the German lines began to break. The German army was reeling, its defenses breached, its supply lines severed. As the Soviet forces pushed deeper into the city, the situation became increasingly desperate. The Soviet army's momentum was building, and the German army was struggling to keep up. Their defenses were breached, their supply lines severed, and their soldiers were beginning to fall. The once proud Sixth Army was now on the brink of collapse, and the Soviet forces were poised to deliver the final blow. As the Soviet forces pressed on, the German army's situation grew more and more desperate. Their supply lines were severed, their defenses breached, and their soldiers were beginning to fall. The once proud Sixth Army was now on the brink of collapse, and the Soviet forces were poised to deliver the final blow. But even as the outcome seemed all but certain, there were still those who dared to dream of escape. A small group of German soldiers, led by a young officer named Helmut von Maltitz, managed to evade capture and make their way back to German lines. Their story, one of desperation and cunning, would become a testament to the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. As we delve deeper into the story of Stalingrad, we begin to see the faces behind the statistics, the individuals who were caught up in the maelstrom of war. But for now, let's focus on the Soviet push and the devastating consequences that unfolded as the German lines began to break. The German army was reeling, its defenses breached, its supply lines severed. As the Soviet forces pushed deeper into the city, the situation became increasingly desperate. The Soviet army's momentum was building, and the German army was struggling to keep up. Their defenses were breached, their supply lines severed, and their soldiers were beginning to fall. The once proud Sixth Army was now on the brink of collapse, and the Soviet forces were poised to deliver the final blow. The German army's situation was dire, their supply lines severed, their defenses breached, and their soldiers were beginning to fall. The once proud Sixth Army was now on the brink of collapse, and the Soviet forces were poised to deliver the final blow. As the Soviet forces pressed on, the German army's situation grew more and more desperate. Their supply lines were severed, their defenses breached, and their soldiers were beginning to fall. The once proud Sixth Army was now on the brink of collapse, and the Soviet forces were poised to deliver the final blow. But even as the outcome seemed all but certain, there were still those who dared to dream of escape. A small group of German soldiers, led by a young officer named Helmut von Maltitz, managed to evade capture and make their way back to German lines. Their story, one of desperation and cunning, would become a testament to the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. As we delve deeper into the story of Stalingrad, we begin to see the faces behind the statistics, the individuals who were caught up in the maelstrom of war. But for now, let's focus on the Soviet push and the devastating consequences that unfolded as the German lines began to break. The German army was reeling, its defenses breached, its supply lines severed. As the Soviet forces pushed deeper into the city, the situation became increasingly desperate. The Soviet army's momentum was building, and the German army was struggling to keep up. Their defenses were breached, their supply lines severed, and their soldiers were beginning to fall. The once proud Sixth Army was now on the brink of collapse, and the Soviet forces were poised to deliver the final blow. As we continue the story of Stalingrad, we'll explore the human cost of this catastrophic battle. We'll see the faces behind the statistics, the individuals who were caught up in the maelstrom of war. And we'll examine the lessons that can be learned from this devastating conflict, a conflict that would change the course of history forever. The Soviet army's momentum was building, and the German army was struggling to keep up. Their defenses were breached, their supply lines severed, and their soldiers were beginning to fall. The once proud Sixth Army was now on the brink of collapse, and the Soviet forces were poised to deliver the final blow. As the Soviet forces pressed on, the German army's situation grew more and more desperate. Their supply lines were severed, their defenses breached, and their soldiers were beginning to fall. The once proud Sixth Army was now on the brink of collapse, and the Soviet forces were poised to deliver the final blow. But even as the outcome seemed all but certain, there were still those who dared to dream of escape. A small group of German soldiers, led by a young officer named Helmut von Maltitz, managed to evade capture and make their way back to German lines. Their story, one of desperation and cunning, would become a testament to the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. As we delve deeper into the story of Stalingrad, we begin to see the faces behind the statistics, the individuals who were caught up in the maelstrom of war. But for now, let's focus on the Soviet push and the devastating consequences that unfolded as the German lines began to break. The German army was reeling, its defenses breached, its supply lines severed. As the Soviet forces pushed deeper into the city, the situation became increasingly desperate. The Soviet army's momentum was building, and the German army was struggling to keep up. Their defenses were breached, their supply lines severed, and their soldiers were beginning to fall. The once proud Sixth Army was now on the brink of collapse, and the Soviet forces were poised to deliver the final blow. As we continue the story of Stalingrad, we'll explore the human cost of this catastrophic battle. We'll see the faces behind the statistics, the individuals who were caught up in the maelstrom of war. And we'll examine the lessons that can be learned from this devastating conflict, a conflict that would change the course of history forever. The German army's situation was dire, their supply lines severed, their defenses breached, and their soldiers were beginning to fall. The once proud Sixth Army was now on the brink of collapse, and the Soviet forces were poised to deliver the final blow. As the Soviet forces pressed on, the German army's situation grew more and more desperate. Their supply lines were severed, their defenses breached, and their soldiers as the battle for Stalingrad raged on. A sense of desperation began to grip the German army. Their situation was becoming increasingly hopeless, and it was only a matter of time before they were overwhelmed by the Soviet forces. But it wasn't just the enemy that posed a threat. The German army's own leadership was starting to question whether they could continue to fight on. In the midst of this chaos, a decision would be made that would change the course of history forever. Deep within the Sixth Army's command center, General Friedrich Paulus and his staff were engaged in a heated debate about whether to surrender or continue fighting. The numbers were stark. The Sixth Army was vastly outnumbered and outgunned, with over 91,000 German soldiers surrounded by the Soviet forces. The German army's supplies were running low, and their ammunition was almost exhausted. But Hitler refused to accept defeat. In a series of increasingly desperate telephone calls, he urged Paulus to hold out, promising to send in reinforcements and supplies. The problem was there were none to send. The German army's resources were stretched to the breaking point, and Hitler's promises were nothing more than empty words. As the days ticked by, the Soviet forces closed in on the German lines. The battle for Stalingrad had been raging on for months, with both sides suffering heavy losses. But the Soviet army's momentum was growing, and the German defenses began to crumble. It was only a matter of time before the Soviet forces broke through, and the Sixth Army was cut off from the rest of the German army. The German army's situation was made even more desperate by the fact that they were cut off from their supply lines. The Soviet forces had secured the Don River, which had been the Sixth Army's lifeline. Without access to food, water, and ammunition, the German army's soldiers were on the brink of collapse. Despite the odds, the German army's soldiers continued to fight on. But their efforts were in vain. The Soviet forces were too strong, and the German army's defenses were too weak. It was only a matter of time before the Sixth Army was defeated. As the German army teetered on the brink of collapse, it became clear that their fate was all but sealed. But what exactly was the final cost of the German army's defeat, and what were the consequences for the soldiers who survived? The answer is a story of tragedy, sacrifice, and loss. As the Soviet forces closed in, the German army's soldiers were forced to abandon their positions and retreat to the outskirts of Stalingrad. But it was too late. The Soviet forces had already secured the city, and the German army was trapped. In the final days of the battle, the German army suffered some of its heaviest losses, with thousands of soldiers killed, wounded, or captured. The German army's defeat at Stalingrad was a turning point in the war. It marked the beginning of the end of the Third Reich and the final collapse of the German army. The consequences of the German army's defeat were far-reaching, affecting not just the soldiers who survived, but also the civilians who lived in the shadow of the war. But the story of the German army's defeat at Stalingrad is not just one of tragedy and loss. It is also a story of sacrifice, bravery, and loyalty. The German army's soldiers fought on, even when all seemed lost, and their sacrifice will never be forgotten. As we look back on the battle for Stalingrad, it is clear that the German army's defeat was a pivotal moment in history. It marked the beginning of the end of the Third Reich and the final collapse of the German army. But it also serves as a reminder of the bravery and sacrifice of the soldiers who fought on, even when all seemed lost. And yet, despite the magnitude of the German army's defeat, there is still much that we do not know. What exactly happened to the 6,000 German soldiers who survived the battle? Did they manage to escape, or were they captured and imprisoned? The answers to these questions remain a mystery, lost in the fog of history. But one thing is certain: the battle for Stalingrad was a turning point in the war, and the German army's defeat marked the beginning of the end of the Third Reich. As we look back on this pivotal moment in history, we are reminded of the bravery and sacrifice of the soldiers who fought on, even when all seemed lost. As the Soviet forces finally break through the German lines, the city of Stalingrad lies in ruins. The once thriving metropolis, now a battle-scarred wasteland, is a testament to the devastating power of war. The streets, once bustling with life, are now littered with the remnants of a forgotten civilization. The silence is deafening, punctuated only by the distant hum of Soviet artillery and the faint cries of the wounded. The German army, once a proud and formidable force, is left in tatters. Thousands of soldiers lie dead or wounded, their bodies scattered across the frozen landscape like so many discarded toys. The survivors, shell-shocked and demoralized, are forced to confront the harsh reality of their situation. They are surrounded, outnumbered, and outgunned. The prospect of escape seems all but impossible. As the Soviet forces begin to occupy the city, they are met with a scene of unimaginable destruction. Buildings reduced to rubble, streets choked with debris, and a landscape scarred by the relentless bombardment of artillery and air raids. The stench of death and decay hangs heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the horrors that have been perpetrated. The German soldiers, many of whom are barely clinging to life, are forced to confront the traumas of their experience. The screams of the wounded, the cries of the dying, and the stench of death are etched into their minds like a permanent scar. The psychological toll of the battle is immense, and the survivors will carry the scars of their ordeal for the rest of their lives. But as the dust settles on the Battle of Stalingrad, it becomes clear that the city will never be the same again. The German army, once a proud and formidable force, has been all but destroyed. The survivors, many of whom will spend the rest of their lives in Soviet captivity, are forced to confront the harsh reality of their situation. They are prisoners of war, their fate all but sealed. The city of Stalingrad, once a thriving metropolis, is left to pick up the pieces. The Soviet forces, having emerged victorious, are tasked with the daunting task of rebuilding a city that has been reduced to rubble. The task is Herculean, but the Soviet people rise to the challenge with characteristic resilience. As the city begins to rebuild, the survivors of the battle are left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. Many will spend years in Soviet captivity, struggling to come to terms with their experiences. Others will be forced to confront the traumas of their ordeal, their minds forever scarred by the horrors of war. The legacy of the Battle of Stalingrad is complex and multifaceted. On one hand, it marks a turning point in the war, a crushing defeat for the German army that will never be forgotten. On the other hand, it serves as a painful reminder of the human cost of war, the countless lives lost and destroyed by the conflict. As the years pass, the city of Stalingrad will rise from the ashes, its people rebuilding their lives and their city with characteristic resilience. But the scars of the battle will never be forgotten, a permanent reminder of the devastating power of war. The German soldiers who survived the battle, many of whom will spend the rest of their lives in Soviet captivity, will carry the scars of their experience with them forever. Their stories, like the city of Stalingrad itself, are a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. And so, as we reflect on the aftermath of the Battle of Stalingrad, we are left with a profound question. What exactly happened to the German soldiers who survived the battle, and how did they cope with the trauma of their experience? The answer, like the city of Stalingrad itself, is a complex and multifaceted one. But one thing is certain: the Battle of Stalingrad will never be forgotten, its legacy etched into the fabric of history like a permanent scar. The Battle of Stalingrad, one of the most pivotal moments in World War II, had left the German army reeling. But as the Soviet forces closed in, a new horror was unfolding: the fate of the 91,000 Germans who were captured during the battle. These prisoners, subjected to inhumane treatment, were about to face a horrific fate that would haunt the world for generations to come. As the Soviet forces took control of the city, they began to round up the German prisoners, herding them into cramped and unsanitary conditions. Many were left to fend for themselves, without food, water, or medical attention. The once mighty German army, now broken and defeated, was forced to confront the harsh reality of their situation. The Soviet forces, fueled by their own losses and sacrifices, exacted a brutal revenge on their captives. Many German prisoners were executed on the spot, shot in the back or blown up with grenades. Others were sent to labor camps, where they were worked to death in the harsh conditions of Siberian mines and factories. The German army's leadership, already reeling from the consequences of their defeat, was now held accountable for their actions. High-ranking officers, including generals and colonels, were put on trial for their role in the Battle of Stalingrad. The trials, held in secret, were a sham, with the outcome predetermined by the Soviet authorities. Many of these officers were executed, their bodies left to rot in the freezing Siberian wilderness. Others were imprisoned, their families left to wonder if they would ever see them again. As the German prisoners faced a horrific fate, it became clear that the consequences of the German army's defeat were far-reaching and devastating. But what exactly were the long-term consequences of the Battle of Stalingrad, and how did it shape the course of World War II? To understand the full extent of the tragedy, we need to look at the human cost of the battle and the impact it had on the survivors. One of the most chilling stories to emerge from the Battle of Stalingrad is that of the German prisoners who were sent to Siberia. Conditions in these camps were brutal, with prisoners forced to work long hours in freezing temperatures, with little food or medical attention. Many prisoners died in the camps, their bodies left to rot in the snow. The Soviet authorities, however, claimed that the prisoners were being treated humanely, and that the conditions in the camps were better than those in German POW camps during World War I. But the truth was far from it. Prisoners were subjected to forced labor, with many dying from exhaustion, hunger, and disease. Others were sent to special camps, where they were subjected to brutal treatment, including torture and execution. As the months passed, the German prisoners became a forgotten people, left to rot in the Siberian wilderness. Their plight was little reported in the Western press, with many assuming that they had been taken prisoner by the Soviet forces. But the truth was far from it. The story of the German prisoners at Stalingrad is a tragic one, a testament to the horrors of war and the consequences of defeat. But it is also a reminder of the importance of holding those in power accountable for their actions. The German army's leadership, which had promised its soldiers that they would be treated as heroes if they were captured, had let them down in the most devastating way possible. As we reflect on the long-term consequences of the Battle of Stalingrad, we are left with a haunting question. What exactly did the world lose as a result of this tragedy? The answer is complex and multifaceted, but one thing is certain: The Battle of Stalingrad marked a turning point in World War II, a moment when the tide of the war finally began to turn against the Axis powers. The German prisoners, once the pride of the German army, were now a symbol of defeat and weakness. Their fate, a testament to the horrors of war, would haunt the world for generations to come. And as we look back on this tragic moment in history, we are left with a haunting question. What exactly did the world lose as a result of this tragedy? As the world begins to rebuild after the devastation of World War II, it becomes clear that the Battle of Stalingrad was a pivotal moment in history. But what exactly were the lasting impacts of the battle, and how did it shape the world we live in today? The answer lies in the unassuming landscape of Eastern Europe, where the Soviet Union's triumphant cry of victory echoed through the ruins of Stalingrad. Imagine a city, once a thriving metropolis of over 1 million people, now reduced to a mere shadow of its former self. The streets are empty, the buildings lie in ruins, and the once clear skies are now a permanent gray. It's a city that has been ravaged by war, and yet it holds a secret that would change the course of history forever. As the German army's defeat at Stalingrad became clear, the world witnessed a seismic shift in power. The Soviet Union, once seen as a minor player in World War II, had emerged as a major force to be reckoned with. The battle marked a turning point in the war, and the consequences would be felt for years to come. The German army's defeat was a crushing blow to Hitler's ambitions, and the war began to turn in favor of the Allies. The world was about to enter a new era, one where the Soviet Union would play a dominant role in shaping global politics. The implications were far-reaching, and the ripple effects would be felt in every corner of the world. As the war drew to a close, the Soviet Union began to assert its influence, and the stage was set for the Cold War. But what about the Germans who were captured during the battle? The 91,000 prisoners of war who endured unimaginable horrors in the Soviet gulags? Their fate was a dark and foreboding chapter in the history of World War II. The conditions they faced were nothing short of inhumane, and their stories are a testament to the brutality of war. The Battle of Stalingrad marked a turning point not only in the war, but also in the lives of the soldiers who fought it. The experiences of these soldiers would shape the course of their lives, and the lives of their families, for generations to come. Their stories are a poignant reminder of the human cost of war, and the lasting impact it can have on individuals and communities. As we look back on the Battle of Stalingrad, it becomes clear that this pivotal moment in history was more than just a battle. It was a turning point in the lives of millions of people. The world was forever changed by the events that unfolded in the streets of Stalingrad, and the echoes of that battle still resonate today. But what about the long-term consequences of the battle? How did it shape the world we live in today? The answer lies in the complex web of alliances and rivalries that emerged in the aftermath of the war. The Soviet Union's rise to power had a profound impact on the global balance of power, and the stage was set for the Cold War. The Battle of Stalingrad was a defining moment in the history of World War II, and its legacy continues to shape our world today. The story of this pivotal battle is a reminder of the human cost of war, and the lasting impact it can have on individuals and communities. As we continue to explore the story of the 91,000 Germans who were captured during the battle, we will uncover the dark secrets of the Soviet gulags and the unimaginable horrors that took place within their walls. The fate of these prisoners of war is a testament to the brutality of war and a reminder of the importance of learning from history. The Battle of Stalingrad may be over, but its impact is still felt today. The world is forever changed by the events that unfolded in the streets of Stalingrad, and the echoes of that battle continue to resonate through our lives. As we reflect on the legacy of the Battle of Stalingrad, it becomes clear that the sacrifices made by the German soldiers were not in vain. But what exactly did the battle teach us about the nature of war and the human cost of conflict? We've seen the horrific fate that awaited the 91,000 Germans who were captured during the battle, and the long-term consequences that shook the world. Now, let's explore the stories of the survivors, the men who managed to cling to life amidst the chaos and destruction. For many of these soldiers, the experience of Stalingrad would stay with them forever. The memories of the battle would haunt them, a constant reminder of the atrocities they witnessed and the friends they lost. Some struggled to come to terms with their past, grappling with the moral implications of their actions in the war. Others were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives, trying to rebuild in the aftermath of the devastation. Take, for instance, the story of Hans Schaefer, a German soldier who was captured during the battle. Schaefer would spend the next 4 years in a Soviet prison camp, subjected to forced labor and brutal treatment. Yet, despite the trauma he endured, he would go on to become an advocate for reconciliation between Germany and the Soviet Union. His experiences at Stalingrad had left an indelible mark on his psyche, but they also taught him the importance of forgiveness and understanding. Schaefer's story is not unique. Many German survivors of Stalingrad would go on to become vocal critics of the Nazi regime, using their experiences to speak out against the atrocities committed during the war. Their testimonies provide a powerful reminder of the human cost of conflict and the enduring legacy of sacrifice and bravery displayed by the German soldiers during the Battle of Stalingrad. As we explore the stories of the survivors, it's clear that their experiences were shaped by the unique circumstances of the battle. The prolonged siege, the harsh Russian winter, and the relentless Soviet advance all took their toll on the German army. But it's also clear that the survivors were driven by a shared sense of purpose, a determination to hold on to their humanity in the face of unimaginable adversity. The legacy of the Battle of Stalingrad is complex and multifaceted, reflecting the contradictions and paradoxes of war. On one hand, it was a brutal and devastating conflict that left deep scars on the world. On the other hand, it was also a testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit, as soldiers and civilians alike struggled to survive against overwhelming odds. As we reflect on the lessons of Stalingrad, we're reminded that war is not just about politics or strategy, it's about people. It's about the ordinary men and women who find themselves caught up in extraordinary circumstances, forced to make impossible choices and confront unimaginable horrors. And it's about the enduring power of the human spirit, which can survive even the most unspeakable atrocities. The story of the German survivors of Stalingrad is a testament to this power, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. And as we continue to explore the legacy of the Battle of Stalingrad, we're left with a profound question. What can we learn from the sacrifices made by these soldiers, and how can we apply those lessons to our own lives today? Imagine being trapped in a city with no escape, surrounded by enemy forces, and facing unimaginable hardship. This was the reality for the 91,000 German soldiers who found themselves ensnared in the Battle of Stalingrad. As we reflect on the lessons of Stalingrad, it becomes clear that the battle was a turning point in history. But what exactly can we learn from the experiences of the German soldiers, and how can we apply those lessons to our own lives today? The bravery and sacrifice displayed by the German soldiers during the battle is a testament to the enduring spirit of humanity. Despite being vastly outnumbered and outgunned, they fought with a ferocity that would be remembered for generations to come. But their struggle was not just about military victory, it was about the human cost of war. The Battle of Stalingrad serves as a powerful reminder of the devastating impact of conflict on individuals and communities. One of the most striking aspects of the Battle of Stalingrad was the way it exposed the harsh realities of war to the German people. For the first time, they saw the true extent of the Soviet Union's military might and the horrors of modern warfare. The images of mangled bodies, destroyed cities, and starving civilians were seared into the collective consciousness of the German people. This was a turning point in the war, not just for the soldiers on the front lines, but for the entire nation. The legacy of Stalingrad continues to inspire and educate us today, serving as a powerful reminder of the importance of peace and understanding. The battle taught us that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for a better tomorrow. The German soldiers who fought at Stalingrad knew that they were fighting not just for their country, but for their families, their friends, and their communities. This sense of purpose and belonging is a crucial aspect of any successful military campaign, and it's something that we can all learn from. As we look back on the Battle of Stalingrad, we're reminded of the importance of empathy and compassion. The German soldiers who fought at Stalingrad were not just enemy soldiers. They were human beings with families, hopes, and dreams. They were individuals who were caught up in a conflict that was beyond their control. This is a lesson that we can all apply to our own lives, whether we're in the midst of a conflict or simply trying to navigate the challenges of everyday life. The Battle of Stalingrad may have been a brutal and devastating conflict, but it also taught us the value of resilience and determination. Despite being surrounded and outnumbered, the German soldiers refused to give up. They fought on, even in the face of overwhelming odds, and they inspired a nation to stand up for what they believed in. This is a lesson that we can all learn from, whether we're facing personal challenges or simply trying to make a difference in the world. As we continue to explore the lessons of Stalingrad, we're reminded of the importance of learning from our mistakes. The German soldiers who fought at Stalingrad made mistakes, just like any other soldiers in any other conflict. But it's how they learned from those mistakes that's truly remarkable. They adapted, they innovated, and they found new ways to overcome the challenges that they faced. This is a lesson that we can all apply to our own lives, whether we're in the midst of a crisis or simply trying to improve ourselves. The Battle of Stalingrad may be a dark chapter in history, but it's also a powerful reminder of the human spirit. The bravery, sacrifice, and resilience displayed by the German soldiers during the battle are a testament to the enduring power of humanity. As we reflect on the lessons of Stalingrad, we're reminded of the importance of peace, understanding, and empathy. These are values that we can all apply to our own lives, whether we're in the midst of a conflict or simply trying to make a positive impact on the world. As we reflect on the modern-day relevance of the Battle of Stalingrad, it becomes clear that the battle was a turning point in history. But what exactly can we learn from the experiences of the German soldiers, and how can we apply those lessons to our own lives today? The bravery and sacrifice displayed by the German soldiers during the battle continues to inspire us today, a poignant reminder of the human cost of conflict. Imagine being surrounded by enemy forces, with no escape in sight, and facing unimaginable hardship. This was the reality for the 91,000 German soldiers who found themselves ensnared in the Battle of Stalingrad. As we delve into the modern-day relevance of the battle, it becomes clear that the lessons learned on the Eastern Front continue to shape our world today. The Battle of Stalingrad serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of peace and understanding. In the midst of war, it's easy to lose sight of the human cost, but the German soldiers' experiences serve as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of conflict. We often focus on the grand strategies and military tactics, but the stories of the individual soldiers offer a more nuanced understanding of the battle's impact. Take the story of Erwin Koenig, a German soldier who was wounded during the battle and spent months in a Soviet hospital. His experiences offer a glimpse into the complexities of war, where enemy lines are often blurred and humanity is tested. Koenig's story raises important questions about the nature of war, the role of individual soldiers, and the consequences of military actions. The legacy of Stalingrad serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of learning from our past and working towards a better future. By examining the battle's impact on the soldiers, the city, and the world, we can gain a deeper understanding of the complexities of conflict and the importance of peace. As we reflect on the modern-day relevance of the Battle of Stalingrad, it becomes clear that the battle was not just a military engagement, but a human drama that continues to shape our world today. The bravery and sacrifice displayed by the German soldiers during the battle continues to inspire us today. We often focus on the Allied victory, but the German soldiers' experiences offer a more nuanced understanding of the battle's impact. Their stories serve as a reminder of the human cost of conflict, a poignant reminder of the devastating consequences of war. As we explore the modern-day relevance of the Battle of Stalingrad, we begin to see the connections between the past and present. We realize that the lessons learned on the Eastern Front continue to shape our world today, from the importance of diplomacy to the role of individual soldiers in shaping the course of history. By examining the battle's impact on the soldiers, the city, and the world, we can gain a deeper understanding of the complexities of conflict and the importance of peace. The Battle of Stalingrad serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of understanding and empathy. In the midst of war, it's easy to lose sight of the human cost, but the German soldiers' experiences offer a more nuanced understanding of the battle's impact. By examining the battle's legacy, we can gain a deeper understanding of the complexities of conflict and the importance of peace. As we reflect on the modern-day relevance of the Battle of Stalingrad, it becomes clear that the battle was a turning point in history, one that continues to shape our world today. As we stand at the crossroads of history, a haunting question echoes through the void. What happened to the 91,000 Germans who were trapped at Stalingrad? The battle was a human toll, a catastrophic event that would leave an indelible mark on the world. Imagine being part of a massive fighting force, surrounded by enemy lines, and facing unimaginable hardship. The German army's defeat at Stalingrad was a crushing blow to Hitler's ambitions, and the war began to turn in favor of the Allies. But what exactly were the lasting impacts of the battle, and how did it shape the world we live in today? One of the most devastating consequences of the Battle of Stalingrad was the human toll. Tens of thousands of German soldiers were either killed or wounded, leaving families shattered and communities in mourning. The battle was a stark reminder of the brutal nature of war, where human lives are lost in the pursuit of power and territory. As the news of the battle spread, it sent shockwaves across Germany. The public was in a state of outrage, demanding answers from their leaders. The German high command was caught off guard, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of the defeat. The repercussions were far-reaching, with Hitler's grip on power beginning to slip. The Battle of Stalingrad marked a turning point in the war. The tide began to shift in favor of the Allies, and the German army's fortunes began to decline. The battle was a wake-up call for the German military, a stark reminder of the need for reform and reorganization. But the battle's impact went beyond the military. The economic strain of the war was beginning to show, with resources dwindling and production slowing down. The German people were growing weary, their spirits dampened by the relentless bombardment of bad news. As we reflect on the final cost of the Battle of Stalingrad, it becomes clear that the battle was a pivotal moment in history. The consequences of the battle are still felt today, a testament to the enduring power of human sacrifice and resilience. But what exactly was the lasting impact of the battle, and how did it shape the world we live in today? We'll explore this question in the next section, as we delve into the legacy of the Battle of Stalingrad and its modern-day relevance. But for now, let's remember the 91,000 Germans who were trapped at Stalingrad, their stories and their struggles. Their sacrifice will never be forgotten, and their legacy will continue to inspire us for generations to come. As we stand at the precipice of a new era, the echoes of the Battle of Stalingrad still resonate through the sands of time. The German army's defeat marked the end of an era, and with it, the world began to shift on its axis. The consequences of this pivotal moment would be felt for years to come, as the world struggled to come to terms with the devastation of World War II. The Soviet Union, once a fledgling power, emerged from the ashes as a major force to be reckoned with. Their victory at Stalingrad marked a turning point in the war, and the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany's territorial ambitions. As the Red Army pushed forward, the world began to rebuild, and the seeds of a new order were sown. But what of the 91,000 German soldiers who were trapped at Stalingrad? Their fate remains shrouded in mystery, a haunting reminder of the human cost of war. As we reflect on the end of an era, it becomes clear that the Battle of Stalingrad was a crucible, testing the mettle of soldiers, politicians, and ordinary people alike. The world was forever changed by the events of those fateful months, as the old certainties were swept away and new possibilities emerged. The Soviet Union, once a pariah state, had become a major power, and the world began to recognize its influence. The consequences of the battle would be felt for decades to come, as the world grappled with the aftermath of the war. As we look back, it's clear that the Battle of Stalingrad was a catalyst for change, a moment that marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany's ambitions. But what exactly can we learn from the experiences of the German soldiers, and how can we apply those lessons to our own lives today? The answer lies in the stories of those who fought and survived, their struggles and sacrifices etched into the fabric of history. The stories of the soldiers who fought at Stalingrad are a testament to the human spirit, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. As we continue to explore the legacy of the Battle of Stalingrad, we'll delve into the stories of those who fought and survived, and uncover the lessons that can be applied to our own lives today. But for now, let's take a moment to reflect on the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in world history. The Battle of Stalingrad may be over, but its impact continues to be felt, a reminder of the human cost of war and the power of the human spirit. Imagine standing amidst the rubble of a once great city, the air thick with the weight of history. The battlefields of Stalingrad, where over 91,000 Germans were encircled, now lie silent, a testament to the devastating consequences of war. As we reflect on the lasting impacts of the Battle of Stalingrad, it becomes clear that the battle was a pivotal moment in history. But what exactly were the lasting impacts of the battle, and how did it shape the world we live in today? One of the most significant legacies of Stalingrad is the impact it had on the German army. The catastrophic defeat marked a turning point in the war, where the tide began to shift decisively in favor of the Allies. The once mighty German Wehrmacht, which had conquered much of Europe, was now reeling from the effects of Stalingrad. The loss of life, the loss of morale, and the loss of momentum all contributed to a decline in German military fortunes that would ultimately prove irreparable. But the impact of Stalingrad went far beyond the military. The battle marked a seismic shift in the global balance of power, as the Soviet Union emerged as a superpower in its own right. The alliance between the Soviet Union and the United States, forged in the aftermath of Stalingrad, would go on to shape the course of the Cold War and the modern world. The battle also served as a powerful reminder of the human cost of war, where the bravery and sacrifice of soldiers on both sides were laid bare for all to see. As we reflect on the lasting impacts of the Battle of Stalingrad, we are reminded of the enduring power of the human spirit. Despite the unimaginable horrors they faced, the German soldiers who fought at Stalingrad showed a bravery and resilience that is a testament to the very best of humanity. Their sacrifice will never be forgotten, and their legacy continues to inspire and educate us today. But the legacy of Stalingrad is not just a nostalgic reminder of a bygone era. It serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of peace and understanding in the modern world. As we navigate the complex and often treacherous landscape of international politics, we would do well to remember the lessons of Stalingrad. The battle was a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of war, and the importance of working towards a more peaceful and harmonious world. As we stand at the crossroads of history, the echoes of Stalingrad continue to resonate through the sands of time. The battle remains a powerful reminder of the human cost of war and the importance of peace and understanding in the modern world. But what exactly were the lasting impacts of the battle, and how did it shape the world we live in today? The answer to this question is a complex and multifaceted one, but one thing is certain. The Battle of Stalingrad will forever be etched in the annals of history as a pivotal moment in the struggle for peace and understanding. Imagine stepping into the frozen wasteland of Stalingrad, the air thick with the weight of 91,000 German soldiers, trapped and helpless as the Soviet winter closes in. Their fate was sealed, but the question remains: what happened to those who fought, those who died, and those who survived the greatest defeat of the German army in World War II? As we stand at the precipice of this moment in history, the details of the encirclement and the subsequent siege are well documented. But the human cost, the emotional toll, and the long-term impact on the survivors are a different story altogether. It's a tale of sacrifice, of resilience, and of the unbreakable human spirit. The Soviet Union's 62nd Army, led by General Vasily Chukov, successfully encircled the German 6th Army in November 1942. The once thriving city of Stalingrad, now a battleground, became a symbol of the war's brutality and the German army's desperation. As the siege dragged on, the German soldiers were forced to endure unimaginable hardships: freezing temperatures, lack of food and water, and constant bombardment from Soviet artillery. But it's not just the numbers, 91,000 soldiers, that tell the story of Stalingrad. It's the personal stories of those who fought, who died, and who survived. Take, for example, the account of Private First Class Hans von Luck, a German soldier who managed to escape the encirclement. In his memoirs, von Luck described the horrors of the siege, the desperation in the eyes of his comrades, and the unrelenting Soviet artillery that pounded the city day and night. As we reflect on the legacy of sacrifice and the human cost of the Battle of Stalingrad, we're reminded that the soldiers who fought on both sides were not just statistics or footnotes in history books. They were human beings with families, with hopes, and with dreams. The question remains: what happened to those who survived the siege, who were taken prisoner or forced to flee? How did they rebuild their lives, their families, and their communities in the aftermath of one of the most devastating battles in human history? The story of Stalingrad is a powerful reminder of the enduring human spirit, of the capacity for sacrifice, and of the importance of never forgetting the lessons of the past.